Welcome to Binge Movie Recap. Today I will show you a drama, crime, biography film from 2016 that's based on a true story titled Snowden. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. It is 2004. Edward Snowden is doing military training in Fort Benning, Georgia. One morning when jumping out of bed he breaks his leg. The doctor explains that he has been walking on two broken legs for weeks and that his bones are filled with microfractures. It asks when he would be able to resume training, but the doctor says that if he ever lands on those legs again his bones will turn to powder and says that he will authorize administrative discharge. Fast forward to 2006. Since he cannot do field work, Ed decides to join the intelligence division of the CIA. He is assessed by the senior instructor, Corbin O'Brien. Ed explains that most of his family has worked for the government and that he truly wants to serve the people. Seeing that Ed is highly intelligent and motivated, Corbin accepts him into his class at the Hill, a CIA training center in Virginia. While searching for his class, he meets Hank Forrester, who is working on an encryption machine called Sagaba, which is a successor to Enigma and has never been cracked. Hank is an engineer, instructor and counselor for the trainees on the base. The two have a geeky banter between them before Hank sends him off to class. In the first lesson, Corbin has the class take a proficiency test to create a covert communications network to be deployed in their hometown, backed up, destroyed and restored. The average completion time is 5 hours and if you take more than 8 hours, you fail. Ed finishes the test in 38 minutes and Corbin is impressed. At a coffee shop in Washington, Ed finally meets his online girlfriend Lindsay. The two go for a walk and along the way she takes a few photos. When asked, Ed says he works for the State Department. She says they do not have an office in Virginia, which is where he always visits her website from. She understands that he cannot disclose where he works. He's surprised she knows how to do an IP trace. During the afternoon, they exchange political views as they walk through a peaceful protest against the policies of President Bush and the recent explosions. They seem to have opposing views, but still get along well. Back in class, Corbin shows a newspaper article that says, Bush lets US spy on callers without courts. He asks if it's constitutional to bypass the courts. One student says that the Fourth Amendment prevents searches and seizures without a warrant. Corbin reasons that sometimes the warrants have to be issued by secret courts so they don't tip off the suspects. After class, Hank tells Ed that he used to be a top NSA operative. He managed to develop an algorithm for only $3 million which analyzes terabytes of data that would take a human hundreds of years. It distinguishes between domestic and foreign threats and encrypts the irrelevant information so people can keep their privacy. They did not use it and instead developed a program modeled after his without filters or automation that cost $4 billion. Later, he asks Corbin if all intelligence programs are specifically targeted, and he confirms. Corbin believes that the biggest threats will come from foreign hackers and that without minds like Ed's, the country will be torn apart and that sending him to fight wars over sand and oil would be a waste. Ed is taken aback by his honesty and Corbin says that you do not have to agree with politicians to be a patriot. The year is 2007 and Ed is now working in Geneva with diplomatic cover to maintain CIA's computer security network. His supervisor is not pleased that he hacked their HR website. Ed reasons that it is his job to find vulnerabilities. The man says that he was not asked to do this and that Ed now has a Duroc on his file. Later, as he is shredding some disks, Gabriel approaches him and takes him into his office. Ed is hesitant because he's only allowed to see the finished file, but Gabriel reasons that it doesn't make a difference if he sees how it's put together. He logs into Chi-Score and types in some keywords and receives messages in return. Ed asks how this is possible, and he explains that the system works like Google, but also searches everyone's private data like emails, chats, and text messages. Ed is at a high-level lunch with an undercover CIA agent who informs him that Corbin has given him clearance to begin field operations and that he is tasked with spotting potential targets for illegal activity. His social skills are not the best so he feels miserably. Lindsay sees this and sets him up with a banker named Marwan. Later, Gabriel looks up Marwan and says he is the cleanest Pakistani he has ever seen, with no shady connections. Ed asks if they could check his family and Gabriel clicks on his sister-in-law. A video pops up and Gabriel says it's live from her laptop, which was turned off, but the camera and microphone were activated by the program. Ed is shocked and says to stick with the family in Geneva. Gabriel looks up Marwan's daughter. He does not need a warrant and can look up anyone. He looks at her Facebook account and finds out her boyfriend is cheating on her and he and his mother are here illegally. The CIA agent says that Marwan's bank handles Russian and Saudi money, and Ed is shocked that things are moving so fast. Marwan says that his daughter's boyfriend has been deported and she took too many sleeping pills but she's alright. When they leave, Marwan is drunk and the CIA agent instructs Ed to call the police and tell them he saw Marwan driving so he can be put in jail for a week. They will then offer him a deal he can't refuse because he needs to be with his family. Ed refuses and the CIA agent says he will call the police himself. Ed tries to stop him but gets threatened. Sometime later, Ed has put tape on every webcam and when Lindsay asks why, he says some Russian hackers might be watching them. She takes it off and says it's creepy, but it does not bother her because she has nothing to hide. He also tells her that he resigned from CIA due to personal differences. It is 2009. Ed works for the NSA at Yokota Air Base in Tokyo, Japan. He is working on a backup system called Epic Shelter in case some of their facilities get destroyed. When Japanese officials show up, he shows them the live drone feeds which they love. The NSA asks for their help to spy on the Japanese, but it's against their laws so they don't approve. The NSA tap the entire country anyway. They also slip malicious code into their power grids, dams, hospitals, and other infrastructures so they can just shut everything down when they are no longer allies. They did the same thing in Mexico, Germany, Brazil, and Austria. They also spy on world and industry leaders, tracking their business deals and sex scandals to give the US leverage in negotiations. Ed realizes that this is actually about economic and social control and that they are just using radicalism as an excuse. The only thing he is protecting is the supremacy of the government. After that he worked on Radical Watch. He watched many Americans and had to keep reminding himself that he could prevent a dirty explosive attack and save thousands of lives. He had to watch not only the bad guys, but also their contacts and everyone they interact with. 3 steps from anyone with 40 contacts is a list of 2.5 million people, the vast majority of whom are regular people. The NSA tracks every cell phone in the world, not just those of radicals, but of everyone. Japan was difficult for him and Lindsay because he was not allowed to talk about work. One day he sees her editing lewd pictures of herself and says she should delete them. She asks if it's the Russian hackers again, but he says it's classified and he cannot talk about it because it's an issue of national security. She feels isolated because he works 12-hour days and comes home depressed and miserable. They get into an argument and she goes back to the US. 3 months later he returns to the US and they get back together, with him promising her to change. Ed goes back to work for the CIA as solutions consultant. He was glad to be back in the States, but as he kept working he learned more and more disturbing facts, like when 3 high-ranking NSA officials filed complaints about the abuse and overreach of surveillance systems, they were met with serious backlash such as the FBI raiding their homes. And when a whistleblower turned to the press, seeing that his attempts to change the system from within were futile, he was charged under the Espionage Act to send a message to anyone who would try the same. The entire intelligence community was shocked by this. Ed is out hunting with Corbin. He is told about a new program in Hawaii, spying against the Chinese. When Ed raises concerns about mass surveillance, Corbin states that there has not been a World War III because they have generally used their power for the good of the world. Corbin also says that people already catalog their lives on the web, but Ed says that they only share part of it and do not know that the rest is being monitored. Corbin introduces him to Jim Lowell, deputy director of the NSA. Jim praises Ed's work on Epic Shelter and says it is brilliant. As Corbin and Jim talk, Ed learns that Epic Shelter is already being used to improve drone pilot response times. With this new job in Hawaii he would have even more access. Ed takes another lie detector test. When asked if he has used programs he's unauthorized for, she seems to catch him in a lie. At home, Ed tells Lindsay about his job offer in Hawaii and tells her that he will do whatever they both deem necessary. He goes back to the kitchen but collapses and has a seizure. The doctor says it's epilepsy, prescribes him medication, and recommends him to rest. In the parking lot outside the hospital, Lindsay decides that Hawaii would be good for Ed because it might be less stressful due to the warmer climate. It is 2012. Ed arrives at his new job in Hawaii to counter-spy on the Chinese. When he walks in, there's a thorough security check. Gabriel, who has been working there for 3 years, notices him. They work in a secret underground base. Gabriel leads him into his office and introduces him to his boss Trevor, and Patrick, who will be working with him. They watch live drone strikes of suspected radicals. Ed's job is to geolocate them. They track the bad guys' cell phones, sometimes just the SIM card. Ed asks how they know the bad guy is carrying the phone, and Patrick says they don't, but Trevor interrupts him and says they get the information from people in the field. They say that the program is called Epic Shelter, and Ed says that he built it and that he had another use in mind, to create a centralized database for all the intelligence programs called Heartbeat. On a hiking trip with Lindsay, he admits that he hasn't been taking his epilepsy medication because it makes him groggy and he needs to be sharp for work. She asks what makes his job more important than his life. One day at work, everyone in the office is watching a live Congress meeting where the subject of government spying and data surveillance is addressed and lied about. Ed shows his coworkers the number of emails and Skype calls Heartbeat has indexed by country so far. They are shocked to find that they are collecting more data on US citizens than on countries like Russia. Patrick tells him to be careful because he could be seen as rocking the boat. Trevor walks in on them and tells Ed not to let anyone unauthorized in anymore. Sometime later, Corbin tells Ed he did a good job tracking down 200 Chinese IPs in his first 4 months. Also Heartbeat. Corbin knows he lied on the last polygraph and asks him the same question. Ed admits that he checked whether Lindsay was cheating on him. Corbin assures that she hasn't cheated on him, and Ed realizes that his girlfriend and he are being actively monitored. He goes home and tells this to Lindsay and instructs her to use encrypted email. He also suspects the house may be bugged and suggests for her to go back to Maryland, but she decides to stay as it would look suspicious otherwise. The next day he goes to work with a Rubik's Cube. He sits down and, while Patrick is distracted, starts copying all the Heartbeat data onto an SD card. Shortly after he finishes, they come back and he drops the SD card. Patrick notices it and steps on it so Trevor doesn't. Ed tells him in sign language that they may never see each other again. He hides the SD card in the Rubik's Cube. When he goes through security, he tosses the cube to a guard and gets it back after being scanned, so he manages to smuggle the data out. He emails a journalist and they arrange to meet at the Mirror Hotel in Hong Kong. Over the coming days he and a couple journalists slowly release information about government surveillance. On June 9, 2013, he officially reveals himself as the one who leaked the information to avoid a witch hunt among the other employees. His passport got revoked while he was in Russia, on his way to Latin America. He got stuck there and Russia granted him asylum, so he has been living there ever since. The US even grounded the Bolivian president's plane because they suspected Snowden was on board. Snowden is willing to face a fair trial, but as long as the Espionage Act is used against whistleblowers, that's not possible. If he had the chance to do it all over again, he would, because it has sparked a public debate, and the ability to question the government and hold it accountable is one of the principles upon which the United States of America was founded. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.